Okay, I think we're live.
Yes, we are live. We'll just wait a minute here just to see who else logs on so that we don't miss anyone. I know that there's still a couple people joining. Great. I know it's 11:30 on the dot, so everyone, you're joining how to get started in government contracting. So we're going to get started here. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. We welcome you to our webinar, How to Get Started in Government Contracting. We've got a great turnout today, and we're really excited to exchange information and share ideas. My name's Heather Amick, and I'm a senior accountant at Singerlewak, and I've been working with the companies who contract with the federal government for the past 6 years. I'm also a new member of the San Fernando chapter of the NCMA. Next, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we have Bill Foster, Director of Contracts at DCMA. He's a seasoned professional with over 30 years of experience with various departments of defense organizations. He's currently serving as president of the San Fernando Valley chapter of NCMA, and he loves sharing his knowledge of government contracting. Next is Kim Wall, CPA. She's a partner of Singerlewak in the Business Solutions Group and has a specialty in accounting for government contractors. Our third presenter is Andrea Roschke, CPA. She's a partner of Singerlewak in the Business Solutions Group and also has experience with accounting with government contractors. Andrea is currently serving as the treasurer of our local chapter of NCMA. Lastly is Renee Meredith, contracts manager at Rantec Microwave Systems. They're a small business manufacturer of navigational antennas sold primarily to the Department of Defense, MDA, and NATO. Renee is going to be our moderator today. So at this time, I will hand it off to you, Renee.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I do apologize. My camera's not working, therefore you don't see me. So welcome, everyone. We have received a full slate of good questions here today, and although we won't be able to get through all of them today, we did try and choose those that were most represented. Before we get started, I would like to go over just some housekeeping items. We'd like everyone to know we are recording this session for those who are unable to attend. We will be placing everyone on mute. Therefore, if you have any questions or are having technical difficulties, please post it in the chat and use the hand emoji at the top. And please don't hesitate to let others know if you agree or like something that they said by using the clapping hands or the thumbs up. There will be CPE credits for 1 hour, so please let us know if you are interested in receiving a certificate of completion in the chat by putting your first and last name. You will need to be present for a minimum of 50 minutes. We will now get started with our presentation, beginning with the agenda. So Heather's completed the introductions, so we will start with the presentation. So today we'll be discussing first, why do business with the federal government? How do you get started? What is the difference between a prime contractor and a subcontractor? Then at the end of the slide deck, we'll provide a list of valuable resources. After the presentation, we'll transition into a question and answer session, and then we'll provide a summarization of the webinar today. So let's begin. Why do business with the federal government? There are many great reasons to do business with the federal government. We're going to list 4 ways the government can help small businesses. Number 1, opportunity to win big. The U.S. government is one of the world's largest spenders, awarding billions of dollars in contracts each year. Participating in this industry can provide significant growth opportunities for your small business. Number 2, another reason is because it can allow you to compete for small business exclusive contracts. The federal government recognizes that not all businesses have equal access to contracting opportunities. For example, there is a certain amount of money set aside for disabled veterans. Set-aside contracts are specifically designed for small businesses, making them more accessible. Number 3, you are also able to enjoy long contract periods. Government contracts typically last from 1 to 3 years, providing stability for your business. If your performance is satisfactory, contracts can be renewed or serve as references for future bids. Number 4, lastly, guaranteed payments. Federal laws ensure that the government adheres to contract terms, minimizing payment risk for contractors. Next slide, please. Now let's go over some questions that you should ask yourself. Do you have an established business? Do you have a record of performance? Do you have the resources and working capital that you need? Do you have the financial capability? Do you have an adequate accounting system, which we will provide in further detail? Do you have clear focus? Do you have realistic goals? Do you have the capacity for the work that you're bidding on? Do you have the commitment? Do you have the right cybersecurity for the work that you're bidding on? Do you understand the federal acquisition regulations? Another resource for small businesses is FAR Part 19. So we'll have those resources, like I said, at the end. So self-assess. What does your company do? When was your company established? What is your financial picture? Who are your customers? What problems do you solve for them? What do you do for them for your what do you do for them that your competition does not? Next slide, please. SAM. So SAM is a great place that you're gonna find very useful. This is where you're gonna go to set up your unique identity identifier, your core data, your assertions, your representations and certifications, and you're going to be able to see the contract opportunities that are out there. You're going to be able to track past performances. It's basically now like a one-stop shop. Next slide, please. Okay, differences between a prime contractor and a subcontractor. The prime contractor has the entire project responsibility. The subcontractor is responsible for a portion of that contract. A prime contractor works directly with the government, while a subcontractor works under the prime contractor or another subcontractor, which can be a little confusing. Prime contractors are responsible for ensuring the scope of work is met. And the subcontractors work under the prime to complete a specific area of the project that needs their expertise. Subs do not work directly with the government, but work for other contractors. Some government contracts require large companies to subcontract a percentage of the job with a small business. On the next slide, we've included a table that kind of helps you understand the relationship, because you can be a first-tier subcontractor or a second-tier subcontractor, and so on. Next slide. So here are the valuable resources that we've included and items that we've mentioned in the slide deck, but we wanted to leave enough time to discuss the questions that were presented. So I will turn it over to Bill or Heather.
And actually, yeah, I'll take over asking some of the questions.
Sorry.
And then that's okay. And then Bill, Andrea, and Kim will weigh in on the questions. So as we said at the beginning of the webinar, we took in all of your questions that we asked you to contribute when you joined or when you registered for the webinar. So from those, we've compiled a couple questions that we're going to go over in more detail. But if you'd like to elaborate or contribute, please feel free. We want this to be open. We want people to feel that they can weigh in, elaborate on their questions, or if there's someone else out there that's had experience with what we're discussing, please feel free to weigh in. So the first question, we'll start off with Bill is going to help us with this one. Question number one is, how do I align my product or service to the government's needs?
Hey, thanks, Heather. Before I jump into that question, I guess I want to first thank everybody for joining today and wish everybody the happy Juneteenth federal holiday. I know a lot of you probably online are working on a day off from your industry, or if you're in the government, probably doing this on your spare time. I want to also acknowledge in the chat, a lot of you asked for the CPE certificates for this webinar, and we'll make sure we get those to you. If we'll do a registration of everybody that was online today, so you don't necessarily have to put your name in there. We'll get certificates out to you based on your registration. So the question is, how do I align my product service to government needs? We had a lot of folks come in with specifics to that, and I hate this answer, but it's about the best answer I can give you. It depends, for obvious reasons. We kind of use the slides today to set up some of the conversation in these questions and interaction. So like was stated on the front end of the webinar, raise your hand if you want to pause and ask something specific to what these questions address, or throw it in the chat, and we'll absolutely make sure that this is a dialogue. We don't want to be a bunch of talking heads just talking at you. We want these webinars to be interactive, so it's really important to us that we do that. One of the specific questions had to do with a product that I think that was a little proprietary, and dealt with an additive to road construction. Road construction is absolutely a government product. I think that there is probably a commercial market for that, but the majority of the dollars are going to be in the state, municipality, and even federal government space. So how do you go look for that, those items? We're going to put in the chat here in just a moment a link to the Apex accelerators. Apex used to be also referred to as Procurement Tech Assistant Program, PTAP. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 97 offices in 49 states. So pretty much everybody that's on this call will be able to know that a little bit more about the Apex accelerators. None of us are part of that organization, and we're not necessarily endorsing. I will endorse them because they are a DoD agency or DoD function that is really critical to what we do, and that's promote industry. But if you go down the path and say, how do my products align to what's being
for the state, are those things going to be listed on?
I'm sorry, can everyone put themselves on mute?
Okay, so whether you're in road construction, whether you're a services provider, whether you do something else in the commodity arena. I know some of you online are business development folks. Some of you may be large businesses who are thinking about, hey, I want to maybe branch off and do my own thing, from being, an employee to my own boss, so you want to take control of your own destiny. Some of you may just be sitting there going, I'm not really doing a whole lot of anything right now. Maybe this government space is a good place to start. whatever position you're in, whatever your thing that you're doing, you need to get familiar with how the government procures, how the government identifies their requirements, what it is that you want to pursue, and then align that to that. We have this. You saw a slide earlier on the SAM.gov, and that kind of shows a couple of things that are really important to know. One is that you need to register in that SAM account. You need to get that what we call the unique entity identifier, UEI, and then go out and look at the North American Industrial Classification System code, what we call the NAICS code, and see where that code aligns to the product service that you are offering to the government. Once you do that, then you'll be able to go out and look at what's been awarded, what's coming up for solicitation. That can be across the entire continental United States. It can also include foreign opportunities. So I'm going to pause there. I saw a couple of hands earlier. I don't see those hands up anymore.
I was just going to say there's also a couple questions in the chat that are coming in. So
yeah. So Heather, go ahead and take the questions, and we can let the panel or I'm glad to help answer them too.
Okay, so there's been a couple questions coming in the chat, which is great. The first question is, can a sole proprietor get into government contracting? Who wants to take that one?
So I can start. I think the accounting folks probably can help identify the sole proprietor, but the answer is yes. A sole proprietor can get into whether you're a sole proprietor or set up as a corporation or an LLC or whatever entity that you're set up as. Yes, you can get a contract with the government. Does not change those basic requirements of the UEI. But there are some steps that you would have to go through when you register with SAM. You have to be able to prove you are who you are. And then there would be pieces that you would work with some of those opportunities to identify yourself as a sole proprietor. But the only disadvantage to potentially doing that is, and this I'm going to turn this one over to the accounting folks on the line, but I don't know if a sole proprietor qualifies as a small business entity. Because if you're a sole proprietor, I'm not sure if you can qualify within that realm, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Right. I would just add that, there might be other tax or liability reasons to form an entity, even if it's as simple as an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or a S corp, because it's something you want to discuss further with your accountant and or legal counsel, because it may be more important to do it for other reasons.
Okay, is it okay if I ask the next question then? All right. So the next one we have here is, do we have to hold pricing for the entire contract? We already serve some government entities and they expect us to hold pricing. We sell products that are in constant fluctuation and are determined on gas prices.
Okay, I will start the dialogue again, but please add to the chat or raise your hand if there's something that's missing out of this answer. You've kind of described an Achilles heel of doing business with the government in some respects. The government is pretty risk adverse. I've been part of the government for a long time, or associated with the government, even in my former industry capacity, and the risk adversity is we love firm fixed price contracts. We love to lock in the prices, partly because that's what Congress requires us to do with appropriations and authorizations, and So when we enter into a market that we know in the government right now, supply chains are very volatile, labor markets are very volatile, transportation economies of scale are very volatile, and especially materials. You mentioned gasoline. How do we handle that? I think there are some methodologies out there in the accounting world and I would even say the bidding world, to kind of hedge a little bit of the gasoline piece. But if your industry or your service or product is really petroleum centric and dependent on that on a fluctuating market, there's always the ability to ask the government to create an index and award a contract with on a fixed price with a I'm losing the thought right now. It's a economic price adjustment, EPA clause. An FFP EPA allows you to index a commodity that might be a significant driver to what you are buying or selling to the government, or the service that you're providing. And if the contract itself will set up a methodology for you to make sure that we don't put you out of business by entering into a firm fixed price contract and making you deliver at a loss. So that EPA clause is a good clause. It's not used a ton, but if it is a commodity like gas and gasoline, I would say is probably not as volatile as we sometimes think, but it can also be things like titanium or specialty metals or things that are very centric to your product that might warrant us to have that EPA clause in the contract. I'll pause there.
I think we should go over maybe like one more question in the chat and then go to our other question list and kind of go back between the two to try to address all of them. The next question in the chat is, how does a subcontractor work with a contractor as far as government contracting is concerned?
I apologize, Heather. Can you repeat the question? I can't find it in the chat. I was looking for
Oh,
it.
sure, no problem. It was from Arnold King. It says, how does a subcontractor work with a contractor as far as government contracting is concerned?
No, does Renee, does your company work as a sub?
Sorry, yes. So how do they work with them? Was that the question?
Yes. How does a subcontractor work with the contractor?
Basically, as a sub, basically they just flow all of the terms to us, and we basically they're in charge. Basically, we don't go. I guess maybe I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. Are we talking from a prime or a government?
It sounds to me it's a subcontractor working then with the prime contractor, but Arnold,
okay.
I don't know if you want to.
So we're in that scenario a lot. So basically, so we'll work with either Boeing, Raytheon, and basically they will send us the proposal. We'll quote, a lot of ours are over the threshold. So we'll provide cost and pricing data. Basically, they work very closely with us. They support us as we're managing deliveries, whether it be AS 9100. If we do as a small business, there are occasions when you can get performance-based payments where they help you in advance with funding.
Okay, thank you, Renee. All right, we're going to go to our.
Heather, can I just add just a little bit to Renee's got that exact experience. But there are a couple of things. We had on the slide earlier the difference between a prime and a subcontractor, and it's really important. A lot of companies will build their entire business model around subcontracting. Partly because there's an element of sophistication that sometimes goes into prime contracting with the government, having all the business systems in alignment, having different things that prime contractors have to be accountable to. Now, Renee mentioned Boeing, Raytheon, some of the big six that we have, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. Those companies will have a whole nother set of terms, and you've got to be and a lot of times those terms will incorporate a lot of the flow down clauses that Renee just mentioned that come from the government, things like terminating the sovereign right of the government to terminate a contract for convenience, and just halting work if they decide that they no longer need the product or service. So just be, my only caution on that is just be very familiar with the terms that are flowed down from your prime, and then secondly, understand that your relationship, your privity of contract, what we call in government contracting, is between you and the prime. You are not in contract with the government, even though there are those flow downs. Your responsibility is to deliver to that prime in accordance with the contract you sign with them. So they generally will be the one that holds you accountable, because the government's going to hold the prime accountable for any work that you're responsible for that doesn't get that causes the prime to not be able to deliver on time or in accordance with the contract they have with the government. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for adding that. Our next question that we wanted to address is, what is an adequate accounting system to do business with the government? So for that answer, we're going to call on Kim Wall.
Thank you, Heather. And I noticed in the chat, there's at least one question from someone saying they're thinking of starting up their own business to do business with the government. So one of the important steps will be making sure you have an adequate accounting system. So the next question is, what's an adequate accounting system? So the system has to be able to account for the proper segregation of both direct and indirect costs. For direct costs, they have to be identifiable by contract. It's got to allow for a logical and consistent method for cost accumulation of the indirect costs to the proper pool. You may have several pools. You may have fringe, maybe as an intermediate pool, indirect costs, G&A costs. So there's several different pools, and you need to be able to account for all that, along with unallowable costs need to be accounted for separately. The system needs to allow for the reconciliation of any subsidiary ledgers to the general ledger. So if you have a job cost ledger, you have to be able to reconcile that to the general ledger. There's also got to be a timekeeping system that is employed that identifies by employee time the contract or indirect pools that their time should be accounted for in. There's got to be a labor distribution system that charges direct and indirect labor to the appropriate cost objective. So now you're saying, okay, Kim, what systems can do this? We've seen a lot of different systems. It's dependent partially upon the size and complexity of your business as to what you'll need. Some of the programs out there that we've seen are QuickBooks, can be made to work for this. There's bigger packages. We've seen Uninet, we've seen CostPoint, which is a Deltek product. So it's all dependent upon your needs and also what your business model for the future is. So it's just a quick idea, but honestly, if you don't start with a good accounting system, it's hard to convert later on once you get more and more contracts. So we say, set it up now and we'll help you grow into it. So I hope that answered some of your questions.
Yeah, that was great. I think that was a lot of good and helpful information for people looking to get involved in the government contracting industry.
Thank you.
Right. So let's go to our question number 3 that we had from all of your feedback. Does the government require significant investments on contracts, and will they help fund contract work?
So I'll
Well-
start the. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was gonna just say, our experience has been, depending on your contract, you may have a contract scenario where you have a multi-year, and maybe you have to buy, material up front. Our experience has been that you can get performance-based payments, which are tied to different events, which kind of help, small businesses with these multi-year contracts, which has been really great. We've taken advantage of that situation.
Okay, great. And then Bill, did you want to add in?
Yeah, this is this is a common question because a lot of folks sit there and say, hey, I'm not sitting on a boatload of money. I want to get started. I have something that I can do. Even the chat that Kim mentioned earlier about somebody working for a company for 30 years and wanting to go into government contracting. Generally, I would say this, and again, I will defer some of this to my accounting experts here on this line, but the government. If I didn't mention it before, we're risk adverse. And you'll probably hear that a couple more times throughout this discussion. What that means, if we do government contract financing, there's always going to be some sort of consideration or some sort of something that we can tie that to. Renee just mentioned performance on performance-based payments. We have progress payments, and we have those things that would allow contractors to get paid as they incur costs, because we know that small businesses sometimes just don't have the ability to perform for a year and get paid at the end of a year's worth of performance. So there, we try to structure contracts so that you can do that. But I will also say in my business, I have seen companies, especially right now, and tying back to that the uncertainty of gasoline prices and raw materials. Sometimes companies can get a contract and say, we know that what we're going to do is going to be needed by the government beyond this contract, or we are potentially going to pursue additional contracts that may allow us to go out and buy materials or buy specialty labor or test equipment or things that we're going to need in the future. Go to the government and tell them what you need. If you can buy a spool of titanium and you only need 1/10 of it for this contract, but you can buy a spool at a 25% discount if you buy it all at one time, you tell the government that, if you can leverage this, you can offer these prices to the government at a significant discount. The government will work with buying activities, will work with you sometimes and saying, gosh, if we could get a 10% discount by allowing this person to buy their materials, their long lead materials or their bulk materials up front, that makes sense to us. So kind of think outside the box when you're out there looking at how you can propose, and I know it's a little cliche, but always look for ways to save the government money, because it's your taxpayers that are being spent. Whatever that looks like to you, it's really, really important that we do that. And let me just finish one last point on this is, because many years ago, when I was a young PCO for the government working, the government will take will leverage contracts sometimes on non-monetary things. You may be sitting on a land. You may have equity in your buildings. You may have other assets that aren't necessarily liquid, but the government may say, hey, we're good with using that as security to let you get started in this particular commodity or service. You can bring those to bear too. Sometimes it's in the form of just using that to secure a bond for a house or for a contract, or even offering that up as your bond. And the government can use that. And again, you can take non-cash, non-liquid asset type things to get yourself started. I'll let the accountants weigh in.
I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah.
All right, great. I know we still have some other questions that came in through the chat, so let's look at a couple of those. And there was one from Claudia Lantis. I have a great patent. It would be beneficial to many. Nothing on the market like it. How can I submit to the Department of Agriculture? Can we help her with that question?
So yeah, depending on again what your patent is for and how it's applicable to that particular federal agency, like we kind of started in the slides today, I would go identify what that patent relates to from a NAICS code standpoint. See what's being purchased out there by the Department of Agriculture and see where that's at. And then what I would do, because there's always going to be a point of contact in solicitations that are you can pull right off of the SAM account, and you don't even have to register. You could go out today and just go to sam.gov, and we'll put that in the chat. But if you go out to sam.gov, you can find that put in whatever the commodity or product is that your patent pertains to, and see what's been awarded, how many contracts have been awarded under that NAICS code, and any solicitations that are open right now that might be germane to that. And even if it's a solicitation that's way beyond your capability as a small business or as a company, go look at what you could potentially provide to a large business in a sub-to-prime situation, especially if you own the IP to that, which it sounds like you do. So that would be my advice to you.
All right, sounds good. We have another question in the chat from KV. When submitting a proposal for a procurement contract, I buy supplies from a vendor and then provide them to the requesting federal party. How does one determine an appropriate markup for the product that's being requested? For example, contract request is for a printer. Printer can be purchased from a third-party vendor. What percentage increase would be acceptable to charge?
I think now where we're talking about maybe incorporating those rates into the calculations. So if you remember when Kim was talking about the appropriate accounting system, there are rates that you could apply to the purchase price that are the cost of running your business, right? So the government wants the contractors to make a profit and also cover their costs. So the first thing you would do is make sure you have your overhead rates calculated properly that you're going to add into the cost of the items. And then, I mean, a reasonable profit is expected. I don't know if Bill, if you have a comment on that, but I think the government wants the businesses to succeed and have a reasonable profit. So I think if you have a 10, 15, 20% profit built in, it's probably acceptable.
Yeah, no, yeah, pricing is probably one of the most difficult things for new businesses to do. How do I make sure that the price of my product does two things. Keeps me in business and allows me to continue my business, but also keeps me competitive in the marketplace, right? So I appreciated what Andrew just said about having that accounting system. Even if you only do firm fixed price contracts for the government, and you are in a situation where um, you're not going to have an accounting or necessarily an estimating system audit by the government. It's really, really important that having those things that Kim talked about earlier with an accounting system, that allows you to make sure that you've covered all of those things. You're doing the depreciation of assets like copiers or printers or things, and that you're doing that in accordance with government accounting standards. And so that accounting system, I think, is the key to this. Once you spit out that number, what's reasonable profit? Well, this is where you guys know your business better than anyone. And my father-in-law, who was in the fence business and did a lot of contracting at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, always would come to me and say, we bid every contract at zero profit. And I'm going, that makes 0 sense to me. What are you talking about? And he said, we do that because there are so many fence contractors that go for this. When we show zero profit, we win a lot of contracts. And then what we do is we make profit by going out and managing the projects. We manage the projects. We know that it generally will take 40 hours to do this. If we can do it for 30, that's 10 hours of profit on a firm fixed price contract. So that's a strategy they used. I'm not necessarily advocating for that strategy, but when you determine what you think this should cost, and you're the experts on it, and you maybe put a little bit of margin in there for the what ifs, and you put a reasonable profit on a firm fixed price contract, I would say 10 to 15%. But again, that's not a quotable. Please don't quote me on that, because that's a business decision that your company would have to make. But I hope that kind of helps you a little bit. Accounting system, gosh, you got to start there.
Yeah, we'll have to do a whole nother webinar about the accounting system.
I always say to my clients, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we have to be able to measure the costs and measure the profits, and make sure you know what you're dealing with before you go in and bid on something.
Hey, Heather, can I go back to something that was asked in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
So AJ, I don't know if it's just says AJ here, but talked about I want to start in government contracting, but I have no past performance. And that's a great question, and maybe something that a lot of folks are wondering about. How do you past performance is a measure in every single source selection that the government does. But it always will be, because we need to know that. But don't let that stop you from trying to get into government contracting. This is where the Apex Accelerator, your Small Business Administration office, and Apex is actually tied to the Small Business SBA for the DoD. So, and I know I'm throwing out a ton of acronyms. I'm sorry, I'm an old for Air Force guy. The Small Business Administration and the Apex Accelerator is associated with each other. So if you go into that office and you tell them, hey, I don't have past performance, but I want to start with something small. There are a lot of programs that they're going to introduce you. There's mentor protege programs where if you've got a technical product, they may align you to a high-tech company and say, hey, go out and start, we'll give you a license to this engineering drawing, and you start manufacturing it through this program, and we're going to establish you as a small business and get you going. So my only, don't not enter because you don't have past performance, because I guarantee you every small business in the United States of America had to start without any past performance. Yeah, so that would be my comment on that.
All right. I know we're getting a lot of good information here. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So we still have a little bit of time for a few more questions. I'm going to go back to our list that was from the feedback for the webinar. Our fourth question was, is there benefit to being a socioeconomic disadvantaged business?
Okay, I feel like I'm dominating the panel here, and I don't mean to do that. But you know, this one has always been a little bit near and dear to my heart because what makes our country such a strong country is small business, and within that small business, Congress has recognized that, you know, we need to take care of our socioeconomic element of our small business. So let me give you some specifics on that because it's really important. And hang on one second. I actually had a few notes to share if this question did come up. To become a small business, again, this is something that's really important. If you use the Apex Accelerator or you go on to the and start establishing yourself on the sam.gov site, and I haven't put those out there in the chat. I will do that here in just a moment. That's where you need to start. You need to get your entity established as a small business, small disadvantaged business. And then you need to determine, are you a small disadvantaged business based on what? Is it based on a minority owned institution? Is it based on a women-owned institution? Is it based on a veteran-owned institution or a service disabled veteran-owned institution? Are you located in a hub zone? These are all things that you can find out through the sam.gov site, and you can start working with that Apex Accelerator, and they will direct you towards NAICS codes that align with your core products and say, this is what they're doing over in this state or right here at this military installation or this government entity. And if that aligns to your product, they may say, we want to set aside this contract for a particular small disadvantaged business. There's also this entity of 8A contracting, which is kind of a category. We have 8A set-asides that only 8A companies can get. But it's real money. I pulled some stats. They did 73,000 actions in 2023, $24 billion worth of business in 8A contracts. So that's pretty significant for the federal government in contract awards. So the biggest thing there is you need to understand if you want to go to be an 8A entity and kind of get in that exclusive solicitation arena, there are some specific requirements that you have to meet to become that, and I don't want to go down that exactly all of those requirements, although I do have them, and I'm glad to give them to you if you want to you want me to do that in the chat. But yeah, that small disadvantaged business, if you qualify in one of those socioeconomic categories, pursue that because every large business has to meet certain small business goals. And if you're established that way, that puts you in an advantage for your product and service going from a sub to prime as well.
Okay. We're going over a lot of good questions. I think everybody's brains are full, but we have a little bit of time left. We still have some good questions that are in the chat. The next one, I see one from David Rice. My understanding is that there's a considerable amount of reporting required with certain government contracts, a lot around HR data. Does this apply to small business? So is there anyone that can speak to that?
Well, I know the government does have a lot of reporting requirements related to costs. I'm not sure about HR specific. Renee, maybe do you have any experience with that?
I'm not aware of any HR specific question. I mean, things that we're required to do.
I mean, the only other time I've seen that come up is in a time and materials contract where you have specific job qualifications for the hourly rates you're charging. So then
Right.
we did have to provide resumes and proof of their experience to get the rates approved. Is that if the person who asked the question wants to elaborate a little bit? Did that help, or is there something more specific?
I don't know, David, if you want to weigh in anymore.
Okay. The only other HR thing I'll say is, as Kim mentioned, in the timekeeping and trying to, if people are charging direct to the contract, you have to be really careful with the timekeeping system. Oh, he wrote in the chat EEOC and DEI data.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
EEOC is the the diversity and inclusion we're talking about, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, so we can maybe follow up if anybody. So we did intend for this to be a roundtable discussion. We ended up with a lot more attendees than we're excited that we got a lot more attendees than we expected. But if anybody in the audience knows the answer to that, if they've had any special reporting requirements related to equal opportunity or DEI.
I worked at a previous employer that did have a report like that we did send in, but I don't remember what the requirements were to have to fill in that type of report.
So we can maybe have a follow-up on that.
Yes.
And one thing I'd like to add is there is a lot of reporting that's specialized when you have government contracts. And again, I am going to encourage you to make sure you're accounting for your costs properly, because then they're built into your rates. So yes, it does cost you a little bit more to work with the government, but it's built into your rates, which generally, as long as you get them approved through all the right channels, you're reimbursed to a certain extent, because it's either built into your proposal for a fixed price contract, or on, say, a cost plus fixed fee contract, it's built into the rates you're using on that contract. So while it does take you a little extra, you can generally build that into your rates and recoup parts of it. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And again, part of the reason it's so important to have a good accounting system that you can properly segregate and account for all of that.
All right, I see there's a couple of people that asked about S Corps, establishing an S Corp, or, oh, that was one that we went over before. So we did address that one. Someone had asked that they wanted to start government contracting and establish an S Corp, but I think we've kind of addressed those two topics already. Let's see what we have down here. There's one from Arnold King. He asks, how do you market with the government once you're in?
We talked a little bit about networking, and I'll just do a plug for NCMA right now, because we are all presenting on behalf of the National Contract Management Association, and we are involved in the San Fernando Valley chapter, but there are chapters all over the country. Excuse me. And if you go to NCMA hq.org, and we're going to share the slides that have all these resources available. You could find a local chapter, but we do a lot of networking within NCMA. They have national events. They have a lot of education available, and it's good to network with other people who are doing business with the federal government. That's one of the main benefits. But they have training that you can collaborate with other professionals. Once you get registered with SAMS and with your product, it really is about making those connections and getting to know other people within the government. And Bill, do you have anything to add about that, about how to market your business within the government?
Yeah, I would say it's really important. What we advertise on sam.gov industry days. And a lot of times, even if you're a small business and you just say, hey, this is a technology, or this is an area that I really am kind of interested in, and I wonder how my product would align. Even if you're not going as a prime, you could go introduce yourself to a lot of the business development folks from some of the larger companies that are going to be seriously considering bidding on a particular contract that you have interest in. Sometimes it's space industry. I live here in Southern California where it's there's a lot of space business here going on. And so I would just say, look out there for industry days close in and around the area that you live, or in industries, or in particular places that you want to start pursuing, because that, as Andrew just said, that networking and relationship building with companies, and going out and finding almost like a trade fair, finding who's doing what, and what your product, how your product aligns to that, is going to be the key in my mind.
How about also GSA? I mean, our business model doesn't fit that, but if you have a product that you could sell, GSA might be an option.
Well, I think we're coming to the end now. We only have a couple minutes left. So we want to thank everyone for joining us today and sending in your good questions. It was a great discussion today. We're going to send out the slide deck and the recording and the certificates. We also want to mention that we have another meeting scheduled, a webinar just like this one. It's going to be in July on the 25th, and we're planning to cover the requirements to bid and writing proposals. So anyone that's interested in that, please look out for those emails that'll be coming, and hopefully we'll see you at that meeting next month. It would be great to have more questions and more discussions on those topics. So I don't know if there's anyone else that would like to weigh in and say thank you. Oh, and we have a survey. That was the one thing I almost forgot. So we're going to send everybody a survey. If you could just take a couple minutes to fill out the survey, that would be very helpful. So I think that's it. We really appreciate it again, and thank you, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye.